What's up, squad? It's Brandon from the Bantu Sun. Thanks for joining us today. Wanted to talk about the Ottomans or Turkey. So one of the things that I'm constantly revisiting because every day I'm getting a fresh reminder from news that's coming out of Turkey is Ottoman 2.0. They are back. The Turks are on the ascent. And there may be some issues with their currency right now, but these guys are making major moves. So for those that don't know, the Turks are a Central Asian people. Their ethnic line stretches all the way to Western China, and they kind of flipped Turkey from a Greek or European nation to a Asian Turkish nation in 1299, and they lasted up until the end of World War I, and by that time they were already called the sick men of Europe. They were too big, too diverse, with the Arabic groups in the south and the breakaway regions of the Balkans. It was just a matter of time, and they kind of disintegrated and shrunk down to the Anatolian Peninsula. And this reminds me so much of this Bible story. I got my grandmother's from Alabama, so I grew up on a lot of Bible stories, and it was the Bible story of Abraham's first son Ishmael. This is in Genesis 21:18, and it talks about how Abraham had a wife Sarah, and Sarah did not bore Abraham a child. So he ended up getting his handmaiden Hagar pregnant, and they had a child named Ishmael. So time passed, and then eventually Abraham does get his wife Sarah pregnant with Isaac. So now you got a situation here because his real wife has his second child, his second son. So things are real awkward real quick. So of course Hagar ends up going and getting abandoned to the desert. And as she goes into the desert, she's filled forsaken, despair. Ishmael becomes sick, etc., and exhausted. And then God says, lift up the boy. I will create great nations from him, or I'll make him into a great nation. And that's what happened. They found a nourishment in the desert, and eventually Ishmael's descendants came on to be a powerful people in their own right outside of the house of Abraham and Isaac. And the reason why that reminds me of the story is because I kind of see this. The Turks, when they came in, they had this Ottoman Empire, and it really started to decline around uh, the 1500s. This was due to the fact that Turkey had positioned itself, or the Ottomans had positioned themselves as their natural geographic role as the center of the Eurasian uh, landmass, but they were really heavy-handed in their administration, and the Western Europeans or the Atlantic nations eventually figured out a way, primarily the Portuguese, later in Spanish, the Portuguese figured out a way around in the Cape of Good Hope and getting into the Far East Asia that way. So over the centuries, they deteriorated and then they shrunk down. And this is what big businesses do. When in hard times, they shred jobs. They become lean. That's what they would call it in the corporate world. They became lean, and that's exactly what happened with Turkey. And they joined NATO, so they fell in after World War I, and then in the 1952, February 1952, after years after World War II, and this is what really is shocking to me, they were actually admitted into NATO. And if I was Stalin, and I know Soviet Union was better hard, and they're more the Russians commit. They're not the most. How should I say this? I don't think they are the most aggressive actors in world history, but when they commit, they commit. And actually their reserved behavior may get them in trouble sometimes. So they did wait to get invaded by Napoleon. Napoleon invaded, but when Napoleon invaded, the Russians followed him all the way back to France. And same thing with Hitler. When Hitler invaded, the Soviets followed him all the way back to Berlin. And then they set up the Iron Curtain. They set up this defensive bureaucracy, or this defensive apparatus to kind of protect this Russian core. So they do commit when they do commit, but at this time the Russians they started to become stronger and stronger as the Turks disintegrated. And a lot of what was going on with Eastern Europe at that time was the management, the descent of the Turks. But in 1952, the Turks joined NATO. And if I was Stalin, I would have been in February 1952. I would have been in Istanbul February 1952. Like he should have been testing that Article 5 ASAP because what he didn't. And look what happened. Now Turkey has rebounded and is starting to come back stronger. One of the most favorable demographic outlooks, and what you would consider Europe or NATO in particular. So these guys are getting stronger. They're energy centerpiece. So you have Azerbaijan, which is this natural, this gas and oil, or this oil, Baku oil fields, which is just abundant in a major oil source. On the other side of that, you have Turkmenistan, which is a natural gas hub. To the south of the Turks, you got what they're doing in Cyprus, as well as they have alliances in Qatar. They building out relationships all throughout Africa, like LNG powerhouse Algeria. I was just reading a story the other day. The Ugandans just kicked off the Chinese on a rail project, and they're trying to bring in the Turks to finish the project because they were impressed by the work that the Turkish companies had did in Tanzania. So they're spreading around Africa. They've been everywhere from Ecuador to Mauritania. Like who goes to these countries? In their geographic location. These guys are really spreading their wings. They're become premier drone builders. Uh, so the energy center, drone builders, favorable demographics, and then let's go on and on. I just saw Biden administration just approve a deal for 40 Lockheed and Martin F-16. Like these are fighter planes. So fighter planes are usually meant to go against other powers because they have an air force that has to be combated in the air. Usually with where you have a gap in power and authority, that country won't have an air force, and you get in bombers, and it's just a matter of just imposing your wills. But fighter jets, these are combat vehicles. So that immediately makes them a strong air power in their region. So you put all these things together and you start to see that these Turks are putting themselves in a very favorable position. They're in NATO. So being in NATO, they have this iron dome on them that's protecting them because nobody's really going to invade a NATO country because they're worried about the repercussions from doing such. The moves that's happening in Armenia is primarily Azerbaijan trying to impose their will, but I think anybody from the outside looking in would say Azerbaijan would not do this to Armenia unless they had a complicit go ahead from the Turks. So I think all these things come together and it really put Turkey in this powerful position. And on top of that, you look at the leader, look at Erdogan, and he's trying to really crush his opposition. The primary opposition being the Kurds, that they're the largest, most populous, stateless people on the planet, the Kurds, which is in that more eastern or southeastern regions of Turkey. So that's always going to be a concern. And then Fethullah Gulen, who is the priest and scholar who many believe were behind the 2016 coup that tried to overthrow him, and his ability, Erdogan's ability to withstand that coup and still maintain power, speaks to how strong he is in Turkey right now. So when you have that strong leadership, get consistent leadership, because who's going to beat him at the polls, or who's going to beat them at the election box, even if can we even consider Turkish elections to be competitive anymore at this stage? So he's a sure-footed leader. Like he's a throwback to the father of Turkey, Ataturk, or at least that's the light that he portrays himself as. So the Turks, I think, are a very favorable position. They worked their way up. They went into the desert like Ishmael, and now they're coming and building their own great nation in their own way. And these guys, as Russia is facing its challenges and become weaker, the biggest beneficiary is going to be the Turks, because the Turks are still going to have that link. And if you look at where uh, Erdogan is gone, his top trips usually is going to be in America and in Russia. So he's managing both sides of the equation. He's putting himself in a great position for opportunities. And I really think that Turkey has some really good things ahead for it in its future. So that's our thoughts on why we think Turkey's experienced an Ottoman 2.0 era. Let us know your thoughts and how you see Turkey. Let us know if you're on board with us or you think we're going completely in the opposite direction. So please like, share, subscribe, and comment if you like that content. Until next time, take care. Bantu up.